We are in the human potential era. And that is what the 6th level gives you a roadmap for, is how to operate in this new era. Because the AI component is going to be a team member on our team, but the humans that are in the team have to learn how to deal with each other relationally. And not everybody has the skill set. Not everybody has been trained on how do you have this relational operating system. We are truly at a crisis point, and the crisis point is the AI, this feeling of isolation and disengagement and disconnection, and then also what Ness talked about, which is that we have more people dying than being born. And so when those three things converse, it's a crisis, and only those equipped with the right information to how to navigate the system going forward are going to be the ones successful, because we will all be fighting for the human talent that's left. No matter how long you work at Wallis Companies, whether it's 1 day or 10 years, or you have your whole career with us, we want you to leave better personally and professionally. So intrinsic motivation is when the leader gets it, when the leader can see the forest through the trees, when the leader knows that it can be better than what it is. And maybe they don't have the exact fingerprint on it at that moment, but they just know it's possible because of the talent of the team, because of the market, because of circumstances, but they're intrinsically motivated to give it all. And when all of that is in place, then the fourth one, ingenuity, starts happening.
If you or someone you know owns an apartment community, listen up. Storyboard Living is actively seeking 40 to 250 unit apartment communities within a 3-hour drive of St. Louis, whether that's Carbondale, Illinois, Columbia, Missouri, or St. Louis County. We're easy to work with and competitive on pricing. You can send information to deals@storyboardliving.com. That's deals@storyboardliving.com. Rachel, thank you so much for taking the time. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a long time, so thanks for having me.
Yeah, me too. You have a very impressive resume. I'll lead with the family business, Wallis Companies. You're the second generation, former CEO. You led a lot of initiatives and led with your own leadership style. For context, for anyone who isn't familiar, you guys are in fuel distribution, convenience, retail, car washes, and more. And I believe you've been around for over 50 years, if I'm not mistaken.
It's longer than that now.
1.8 billion in revenue, or over 1.8 billion in revenue, and over 1,200 team members. So an absolutely large operation, which I want to learn more about, and we will. But you're also a culture catalyst, great collaborator, networker. You're currently working on and expanding a consultancy business called The 6th Level, and you've co-authored a book called The 6th Level, which I want to learn more about as well. On top of all of your tremendous accomplishments, you're also the first woman to become president of the Missouri Convenience Store Association, which I think speaks to the fact that you're a great female leader in a male-driven industry. And I've personally witnessed it a little bit with some of our coffee meetings and things like that. I feel like you're very comfortable being the only female in the room if you have to be. So I'm also very interested in and looking forward to learning about your experience as a female businesswoman, and maybe some tips you can share with some of our listeners. I have a daughter, and I'm sure 10 years from now, she's only 4 or 5, but 10 years from now, she'd listen to this and hopefully learn something. So thank you so much for taking the time.
That would be amazing.
But I think it'd be helpful for us to jump into first just your childhood, what it was like maybe growing up in a business family, and your first exposure to entrepreneurship.
Okay, thank you for the softball question. Because, our company started because of my dad's early life hardships. His dad died when he was 13 at an accident at work. And my dad, being the youngest son at 13, had to go to work with his mom. And so that's kind of where the history of our company started, because he worked at Onondaga Cave putting stickers on cars, and his mom would drop him off beforehand and pick him up. Well, then he met somebody there that actually owned a gas station in Sullivan, Missouri. So as soon as he was 16 and bought his own car, he started working at the gas station. And he truly just fell in love just with the business, interacting with the customers. And as soon as he graduated high school, he ended up being able to purchase, with his mom co-signing the loan, to buy the gas station that he was working at from this gentleman, Chester Morris. And so that was kind of the path of the legacy that we have today. My dad had a draft deferment because of his dad dying early. And so once his sister, younger sister that he was supporting to put through college, once she decided that she didn't really enjoy Mizzou as much as she thought she would, she stopped going to college. And then my dad was left with the decision, do I enlist for Vietnam? Because all of his friends were gone. And he did. At this point, he had grown the business. He had accumulated a couple of gas stations in the area. He sold them all. He enlisted in the 101st Airborne. He served 2 years and came back. And he started actually working at the plant that his father had died at as a in between. What am I going to do with my life? And then his mom said, Bill, do you know that there is a gas station for sale in Cuba, Missouri? That is the start of our history. So that's when Wallis Oil Company was formed in May of 1968. He ended up getting financial support as a silent investor, his older brother. And he started this company with one gas station on Route 66. And that gas station did $100,000 in revenue the first year. So the trajectory from $100,000 a year to $1.8 billion. I think you could sum it all up, that, which goes back to your question about growing up in a family business and, just how it shaped my life. But watching my dad interact with his customers, his employees, his family is really the impetus to what I do today, because I saw the connections he made with people. And obviously the first 30 years until he passed. I mean, I credit the legacy and the culture that we have, such a strong foundation based on what he showed us.
Just to back up a little bit, did I hear correctly that he started a gas station business before Wallis Oil Company?
Yes, he did. Yes.
How old was he at the time?
Yeah, like 18. Yes. And not only had started it, but was successful enough. I mean, the one thing in the convenience store industry, it's very cash heavy. And so I do remember one of, Dad's many sayings is like, if you don't know how to manage your cash, you're never going to grow. And so because a lot of people, can have a cash influx, but then think that they have money and then start spending it and then realize that, they can't pay their payroll. So, he had been successful enough. Yeah. And my dad likes to say, he barely graduated high school, but he had a lot of good relationships. I think he would base a lot of his success on that, but also he had good instincts and street smart. And and he started with that one and accumulated a couple before he enlisted in the 101st Airborne.
What impact did the family business have on you growing up? I know you were involved to a certain extent, but to what extent? And then also, were your parents talking business at the dinner table, or was there a clear separation? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I think they did an awesome job. My mom and my dad, they were, equal partners. After my dad started the business in May, he married my mom in December. I was born the next year. So everything was happening quickly. I have 3 younger brothers, all 4 of us part of the second generation. And we all have, distinct memories of the business being under our family home. So one of the stories is the car washes that we had. Dad would bring, empty out the quarters every night from the car washes. Then he would bring them home to the dining room table and he would spill out the bucket. And our job was to put them into stacks and roll them in the paper rollers. Now, I know your daughter will not have that experience of what it is like to put your own change in a roller and take those rollers to the bank to turn it into cash. But Yeah, that's a memory that I have doing store checks. And my dad would go out on a Saturday and go visit the stores, and I would tag along with them. Just I could tell, 10 stories just within what I observed on these store checks. But my mom, she was the college educated one. She did the books and she made sure all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed. And, when I got into high school, she would have also at the dinner table all of, the bank statements and all of the checks, and the checks had to be sorted so she could reconcile the bank statements. And so it was the family business was always an integral part of our life. It was a conversation at the table. And I did take that with my own 3 children and tried to emulate that because I feel like, yeah, there's so much history and richness and knowledge to just interacting with people and running a business. And the earlier you start with that kind of just casual dialogue, I feel the more comfortable kids as they grow up are with conversations or not being afraid of financial statements and understanding how to relate with people in order to, connect and move things forward. So yeah, there are so many. I mean, I guess I can't think of any negative things. So there's so many positive things of the way that my parents shaped my life to who I am today. And yeah, and I would definitely say the legacy piece of creating a great culture, is something that I attribute, to my father.
Well, thank you for sharing that. In terms of like the growth of the company and where you were at certain parts of your life, what did the company look like when you were born? And then maybe, until you went to college, what did that growth look like?
Yes, it was a trajectory. So the growth started with that one store on Route 66, but my dad was really a visionary as well. So he had already bought a piece of property with the same brother who had the financial investment in Leesburg, Missouri. And the reason he did, not only because that was where he grew up, but also because they were building Interstate 44 at the time. So really the primary road was Route 66, and now it's Interstate 44. So the first ground up store that he built was open just a few months before I was born. So, it looked like early on, service stations, people, still coming out and washing your windshields, putting air in your tire, to the change of in the 80s. So I was born in 69. So, fast forward to the 80s and I'm in high school and it shifted to convenience stores. And dad was visionary in that aspect too. I mean, he was a huge networker. I mean, he loved people and competitors were his friends and, part of state associations and national associations to learn where is this industry going. And I recently met a woman and was having a similar conversation with her. And she's like, Rachel, you're not going to, I know you didn't know this, but I worked for your dad in your Steelville store. I'm like, what? You're kidding me. I'm like, okay, tell me your experience. Like, what was your experience like with my dad? And she told a story about how he came in with one of these trade rags about shifting from more of a gas station to a convenience store. She's like, I'm a, 18-year-old just out of high school, and he's asking my opinion. But she's like, it's not even that he asked my opinion. He literally, started writing on the back of a napkin some of the things I was saying. And then she's like, the real credibility happened when the store got remodeled, and some of the exact same things that I said were important to the customers and the flow of the store, they were there. So whether he knew it beforehand or not, or whether he really, listened and took my advice, however it happened, the ideas were implemented. And she's like, now fast forward, she's like, you meet a lot of entrepreneurs, meet a lot of business owners, and you have no idea if they are the same person when they go home as what they show up at work like. And she's like, but I can tell from your stories that your dad, how I felt about your dad and the way he listened to us was the same way that you feel about your dad. Like, he listened to you and he respected you, and you guys had these great conversations, which is exactly, how I remember your dad. So Yeah. And I still hear those stories today, which is really a credit to my dad.
Yeah, that's awesome. It sounds like, the from G1 to G2 and I'm sure G3 to a certain extent, your family has a great reputation in the industry, around town, not just the St. Louis region, but in Missouri in general, because you're originally from Cuba, Missouri, correct?
Yes.
And just going back to your dad, you said something interesting in another interview, I believe, where you said he was a visionary.
Mm-hmm.
But based on what you're telling me now, it sounds like he also had the good traits or great traits of an operator. So do you think he was able to do both, and maybe that's why he was able to scale? Because there are a lot of folks who buy gas stations, and not everyone grows very large organizations. So do you think that was a part of why he was able to do that?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why my dad was able to scale is he was so humble. One of his things that he always talked about was hiring people smarter than he was. And, we can say it as a cliche, hire people, surround yourself with people smarter than you. But for a lot of people, that's a challenge to do because they want to be the ones in charge. They want to be the ones making the decision. They want to get credit for whatever it is. But that mentality that my dad had to surround himself with other people, and it was the perfect balance, just as you're saying, with the street smarts. So he knew in his gut what was right and wrong. He knew he allowed us to have the reins of, okay, this is your responsibility at the company. This is your job. And he would allow us to fail. And then he would come and talk to us and say, well, how did that work out? Well, that didn't work out so great, Dad. Okay, well, what could we do different the next time? So I think he was able to scale because he trusted in himself and what he knew about the operations. And he also trusted in people and had a good instinct about people. And those two combinations, and the third leg for sure was the relationships, because when you think about the acquisitions that we did over time, all of the initial ones started out because of his relationships.
Can we talk about those acquisitions real quick, just at a high level? And then I want to go back to your story, and I'm sure your story will encompass some of the acquisitions in more detail. But just with the different divisions you have, the different departments, did those all come through acquisition, or were some of those organic growth? How did that look exactly?
Yeah, really from 1969 to 1986, 87, it was all organic growth. And there was even a time in the 70s where my parents would say they literally were out of cash. It was something with an oil shortage and, circumstances in the market. And I remember my dad having to go to multiple banks to try to get a loan just to make the next payroll. And finally, one local community bank, People's Bank, that he served on the board for many years until he died, and that I still serve on the board for. But it's those little moments in time where somebody comes with a life raft when you're, struggling in business and gives it to you and allows it to continue. So that being said, back to my dad being a visionary. So the first acquisition happened in like 1987, and this was key. So this was my dad foreseeing in the future, knowing the market, having the relationships, and knowing that at some point Mobil Oil would want to sell their 47 properties in St. Louis. Okay, so now we got to backtrack all the way back to 1969. When my dad bought that one station, it was a Skelly station. He did not want to be operating a Skelly because there was already another Skelly in the town of Cuba. So he, observed around and said, what fuel product could I be a distributor of that would be unique to me? And that was Mobil at the time. But we could only operate up to Pacific, Missouri. We could not operate in what they considered the key market of St. Louis. And so he did this initial acquisition of 4 stores So my mom's family business could be the silent investors. And he was giving them, they had a headwear company, and they had their headwear company is not capital intensive like our convenience store industry. And so their headwear company had extra cash. And so he was giving them a flavor of what it would be like to be a silent partner in the convenience store business. 4 stores. Well, then he wrote a letter with my mom's help because my mom had the journalism degree from Mizzou. So she wrote the letter, he dictates it, and they send this to the president of Mobil Oil Corporation at the time and say, if you ever want to sell the 47 properties, we are interested and we are ready to grow. And that's okay. So we closed on that acquisition, 1993, doubled the size of our company from 250 to 500 employees. And that is when I joined the company officially. I had already graduated college. I had already been working in Miami running Taco Bells. And my parents came down and said, okay, as with mergers and acquisitions, it's on, it's off. It's like, yeah, we're too far apart on the price. And so finally, it was coming to a close. And so I moved from Florida back to Missouri and started 90 days before the acquisition closed. And then that was kind of the start and the trajectory of my 24 years at Wallis Companies. And right before my dad got diagnosed with cancer in 1997, I had 2 kids at that point, and we thought we got it. It was melanoma, and did the surgery, got to clean tissue, and said you got an 80% chance of this never coming back. And so 2 years later, it came back full-fledged, in lymph nodes and throughout his body, and eventually. Even though he tried lots of treatments, he ended up passing away from that in March of 2001. But the year before he did, he had this relationship with a person that owned convenience stores and banks in southern Missouri. And that person's name was Bill Cooper. And they had been talking for a while about us buying Cooper Oil. And so that got us down the 55 South corridor. So that was the last acquisition he did before he died.
It sounds like he was very passionate about what he did, especially given the fact that he was doing it, right up until the end. And I'm sorry to hear that, by the way. He sounds like he was an incredible man. Just so I'm aware, and anyone listening or watching is aware, we've talked about a few different things. Like we've talked about fuel distribution, convenience stores, so on and so forth. So that major acquisition that brought you to the family business, was that buying the real estate and the business? So it was the C-store, the gas station, just the entire thing.
Yeah, it's all the underlying real estate. There were definitely properties that Mobil owned that were leased. So we assume those third-party leases. Our family business strategy has always been to own the real estate. It's just felt more secure. It gives us collateral to invest going forward. So it has, so I would say out of the 200 properties we own today, we own like 90% of them.
Got it. And there, on top of that, there's another, I guess, department that would have territories or contracts in order to distribute fuel to other gas stations?
Yes, so it's a good question. So the fuel distribution, like you could be like Quick Trip and source your own fuel, and it's their name on the fuel and the store. Because we started, back then with this alliance with Mobil, eventually it's a distributor license. So we have a license to distribute Mobil and Exxon fuel now, Exxon and Mobil now. Eventually, we got the same distributor license with ConocoPhillips and with BP. And then we ended up buying BP's half of their assets in St. Louis. They had over 160 properties, where Mobil only had 47. We bought half of their assets in 2006. So yes, you have a license to distribute, a distributor license. So you are basically selling the major oil companies fuel that they're sourcing for you. So we're not pulling it up on the pipeline and doing all of that. And then the On the Run, which is the go-to-market for our convenience store brand, that was also created by Mobil. So that was another alliance with them where we were pump handle snack shops. And after we bought the Mobil assets, and they were just Mobil gas stations, they didn't really have a brand name either. So mobile developed on the run as a concept. And so we turned all of our pump handles and then all of the mobiles that we bought to on the run, because now in that sense, that's a franchise, and we're a regional franchise developer for on the run. Well, then, yeah, there's lots of, things that happen in a company's life, but one of the things that happened to Wallis Companies was it was about 2009, and ExxonMobil decided to sell the On the Run franchise to Circle K. But Circle K at that time was one of our biggest competitors. So we have that relationship with Circle K. And that still stands today.
Got it. That's very interesting. So if I'm following, if I stop at a BP in the St. Louis area, there's a 50% chance Wallis Companies is providing them with the fuel, but does not own that real estate or that particular gas station.
You're a good, quick study. Yes,
Okay.
yeah. If it's a strategic property that we think that eventually we might want to take back as a company up, then we will retain that and lease it to that operator that's there until, like, we have that situation right now where now that person doesn't have a succession plan. They don't want to continue it on. And so instead of selling to the open market, we have a first right of refusal, and then we'll take it over and put our own branding on it and our own employees in it. Yes. But there are so many, yes, that we just have fuel distribution contracts with that independent business person that we supply their fuel to them with our own, transport division.
Got it. That makes sense. And I hope it's clear for anyone listening as well.
It's a quick 101 on the convenience store industry.
So just to really go back to your story, how you became the culture catalyst you are, how you developed your leadership. When you joined the family business, what did your role look like? And then what did that path to becoming CEO look like for you?
Yes. Okay. Well, it was a 24-year time span. But when I got to Wallis Companies, I got a house in Sullivan and started working in our Sullivan mobile gas station. And then Dad's like pulling me out and saying, okay, we really need to get on this transition for the 16 managers that are in St. Louis, because when you just kind of put yourself back there, here we are, this small private family business. These 250 people that have been working for Mobil Oil Corporation, I mean, you're working for a public company. You have salaries, you have benefits, you have, this standardization process that Wallis Companies definitely did not have. And so we started having, I call them listening sessions today. Dad just went out and met with every single person before we closed. He met with the managers. We would go into their store. Like, I can think of our store at Clarkson and Baxter, because at the time that was the highest volume store that Mobil was operating as a company up. And I remember going into that small back room, talking to that manager with Dad, and him asking her, 20 questions, and just having a conversation about what's working today, what's not working. In the end, the two people that were supervising those stores, which were obviously also Mobil employees, once we closed on the acquisition, December of 1993, those two people quit. So Dad pulled me and the current CEO of Wallis Companies today. Her name is Tracy. So he's like, Tracy and Rachel, you guys need to be the supervisors of these stores. And Tracy likes to joke. Tracy just talked to the third generation, because we have a family council set up now. And Tracy came in and told her story, which is very parallel to mine. And Tracy's like, okay, this is crazy, because your Aunt Rachel and I were put in charge of this multi-million-dollar business, and we were not even old enough to rent our own car. So it was, it's kind of like when people say they are put in and like drinking out of a fire hose. We were drinking out of a fire hose, and our only goal was to stabilize the stores, create these relationships, and find our own replacements. And both of us did that within about, 18 months. And when we did, Tracy and I both went to Cuba High School. So we both came back to Cuba, where our headquarters are. And Tracy started an HR department and I started a training department. And the trajectory for myself was a accumulation of all of the services that touched our people. So once Tracy moved out of HR into marketing, I started with training. I took over HR and then recognition, created this whole recognition program, and then took over overseeing IT and called it organizational services because all the tools and resources that touched our employees, I wanted under one umbrella to figure out how we could best service them. And then we've had other unfortunate circumstances after my dad died of melanoma in 2001. We also had a person that was like 6, 7 years older than me and joined at the same time. And he was kind of like our plan B for like our non-family CEO. And anyway, he died at the age of 43. And so when he died, that's when I had all of the org services. And then I took over all of our convenience stores, retail operations. And as a family business, people that work in family businesses, which is a lot of people, but I think you always question, am I moving up and am I doing well because I'm a family member or because I actually am bringing value to the family? And I wanted to take my own litmus test in like 2010. And in a friendly competitor, that's what we call them because we all like work together at the state association. But he called me and he said, look, I just did the WashU MBA program. He's like, I finished it. I think this program is for you. Like, I think you would love it. So I did. And that was when I went back and got my MBA. And there were 65 of us in our MBA class. And I ended up graduating with honors, which I was shocked. Like, I'm just not a very good, like, I'm a hardworking student, but I have to work at getting good grades. And so when I graduated with honors and then got the leadership award from my peers in that class, it was just like my impetus to say, I want to continue to grow with Wallis. Like, I want to continue to be on this leadership path. And then that's what led me to the CEO as a 5-year plan that I worked with my mom and brothers. And then right before that, we closed on the largest acquisition of our family's history in 2016.
Before we talk about that acquisition, I was going to ask you how you were educating yourself along this journey, because it sounds like you wore a lot of different hats and you had to be within or leading various departments. Aside from the MBA, was there anything else you were leaning on for that self-education piece?
Definitely. I feel, my whole life has been like this learning journey. And I would say it was definitely a combination of, share groups. And I was part of a president's council in St. Louis with people that were presidents and CEOs from very different industries. And even though I wasn't a president or CEO at that time, that facilitator was on our advisory board. So he kind of actually, I ended up getting the person that died, Mark. He was supposed to start on this council. And when he passed away and I took over a lot of his responsibility, this guy asked me if I wanted to be in this president's council group. I've always leaned on, coaches at the right time, executive coaches at the right time, consultants at the right time. So I would say there's probably never been a time in my life that I can honestly remember that I wasn't on some kind of learning journey. And it just depended on what the problem was and what I was trying to overcome to figure out the right resource that I needed to get me over that hump to get to the next thing. So, and I would have to say, as a big umbrella to it all, is definitely, my dad and the seeing the legacy that he led. And I'm obviously not the same person as my dad. I mean, I am super task oriented and like things structured and my dad was very relationship forward. I mean, he, if he wrote something down, it was like me taking notes in the truck saying, Rachel, write these 3 things down so I can remember to send these to the manager. Or he would do that with a lot of people. I mean, he would be like, or he would just grab a napkin out of the convenience store and start writing things down. And you would find these little, dad's notes all over the place. So he was not structured, but he was definitely definitely relationship focused. And as I have grown older and wiser, realizing that that is the key. And especially today, I mean, today with, with the technology that we've experienced over the past 20 years with AI today, I have now been convinced that there's nothing more important than relationships and connections and doing business going forward.
I fully agree with that. And it's interesting you mention consultants, coaches, because I feel like everyone I speak to who's at your level, if you will, they rely heavily on coaches, consultants at various points of their journey. And they don't shy away from just seeking out an expert that can help them unlock whatever they may need to unlock to get to the next level. So if we can, I do want to talk about that acquisition.
Yes, and can I just say, because I've had this conversation with several people about it, just, sometimes we get into these mindsets or just like our own paradigms that when you really step back outside of that paradigm, it just does not make sense. Because if you had a broken leg, you would go to a doctor and see an orthopedic. If you had cancer, you were going to go to an oncologist. And the same applies to mental health. So I have no understanding of when you are struggling mentally with relationships or feel like you're stuck or can't get past something that is bringing you down. I have no idea why there would be a barrier to seeking out a coach, a therapist, or whatever mental health, expertise you would need, because it would seem stupid for somebody to say, "Oh God, I broke my leg, but I'll get through it."
Yeah,
Nobody would do that. So why would we do that with our mental health?
that's a great point. That's a great point. I've never thought of it that way. I'm gonna kick myself if I don't ask you this before we get to that acquisition, and then we will definitely talk about what you're doing today. But I spoke to someone a couple of years ago who was kind of like your typical mom and pop gas station operator, and they told me they almost had a formula of if we turn the freezer like X% cooler, our alcohol sales or our beer sales go up Y because we have the coldest beer in town or whatever it is. Are there any tips and tricks or secret sauce of that sort that you can share based on like what you guys have done previously and maybe currently are doing to set yourselves apart from other companies?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that is the beauty of the convenience store industry. I mean, it historically definitely started out as a lot of mom and pop family businesses. And so even when I went through the WashU MBA program, we were doing a statistics class, and the professor was saying, gosh, if we had real data, we could really show some stuff here. And I'm like, God, we got data. Like, we got a lot of data, and I have no idea like what it means. But yeah. So all the smarter people in my MBA class, took the data and started doing these correlations. But I think that's the beauty of it, is you could do one promotion or one thing and really see, did the customers respond to that? Or did our sales increase? And, we could take it with, one thing that we did as On the Run to try to elevate the recognition of On the Run as a brand. Was the 6 is a serious number with the Cardinals and getting 50-cent drinks after the Cardinals scored 6 runs. So yeah, so that's a perfect example of, okay, when the Cardinals scored 6 runs and when we ran that promotion, how much did our cup sales go up the next day? And then what was the tapering off? I mean, did they go up to here and then just taper off a little bit, or did they just go here and then they went back down to where they were? So it is the beauty of a private business, is figuring out, what are the ways that you can differentiate yourself, and is it actually working?
And I've actually never thought of it in your business. You almost do get immediate feedback. It's people are visiting your gas stations and other locations almost on a daily basis. So you're able to see right away if something works or not. That's very cool.
Yeah. In the busiest locations, we could have 2,000 customers a day. And so yeah. And, our industry obviously historically has been dictated by the price of gas sign that is outside. But, as the convenience stores have turned into more food destinations, or even take like a Wally's, then people are looking less at the price and what they can get inside the store. So yeah, it's been a shift over time.
Let's talk about that, because I've noticed, as just a consumer in your world, the shift has really been to like almost an experience. You walk into a newer C-store gas station, and it's like walking into a mid-tier retail store. It's very nice versus maybe 30 years ago, and there's more options for drinks, whatever, snacks, whatever the case may be. Is that the same approach you guys are taking as a company as well? And then for anyone who doesn't know, can you maybe expand on Wally's as well?
Yeah. Well, when you were just sitting there talking about your experience in the destination, so now I have to give credit to my brother Chad, who is the president and chairman of our company today, and my cousin Michael Rubenstein, because the two of them basically came together and, benchmark copycatted off of Bucky's out of Texas and said, hey, what about this? Like, what if we create our own concept and do it a similar, like a vehicle destination? So I just went to a funeral last night and then stopped off to meet some friends and a person that I didn't know well, but he said, I didn't know that you could not have 18-wheelers at Wally's. He's like, I love that. I'm like, yeah, it's a vehicle destination. Like truck drivers already have their destinations. It's called the truck stop. So, but exactly what you're saying about being a destination and in the experience you get in the store, I believe that Wally's, Chad and Michael have created that with Wally's. And now, like, we are rebuilding a property in St. James, Missouri. We've been leasing it all these years, like for a very, very low rental rate from this family. And finally, the family decided, okay, we'll sell it. So they sold us 25 acres in St. James. We are now have all this space to rebuild one of our top stores. And now I know Chad is working with our Wallis Companies teams to say, okay, what kind of experience can we build here at this On the Run that emulates the experience at Wally's? It won't be to the same extent, but Wally's is an investor model. And so even though Wallis Companies is a shareholder, it has a different, management structure and all of that. But it definitely, for those that have not been to Wally's, where the old Chrysler plant used to be, for all of St. Louis individuals that have been here for a while, but their first location was Pontiac, Illinois. And I really wish I could remember. This year is a big year for Route 66. And I'm going to make myself ignorant here because I cannot remember. I think it's the 125th anniversary of Route 66. So the cool thing about Pontiac, Illinois, is it is on Route 66. And I just was reading an article that they're having a lot of Route 66 festivities. So that Wally's will see all of that action. The second one was here in Fenton. And so every time they kind of tweak the whole experience inside, but also keep a lot of the things that are working well because they're doing their own beef jerky and they have all of these food stations. And we just did a tour, like back of the house kitchen, where they are sourcing their own brisket from the same farm for all the Wallies and very specific specifications. And so that's one of their highlight products. And then obviously the popcorn is amazing, which is why I try not to stop too often. But they're actually building their third location in Whitestown, Indiana, should be open this summer, and then a fourth location in Independence, Missouri. So thanks for the Wally's plug. Yes.
Oh, that's exciting. And I have two kind of funny Wally's stories.
Uh-huh.
So I read about Wally's in the Business Journal, I think when it first opened up in Fenton. And I want to say maybe 2 years ago. It could have been longer than that. I visited, and because I'm just not in Fenton often, so it's a little out of my way. So I visited and I recorded a video and I sent it to some friends in Canada. And the response was, only in America. Only in America can something like this exist. Just the sheer, the size, the depth, the offerings. And then my dad was visiting, my brother and I and him, we went to Chicago, a road trip. I made it a point to stop at Wally's on the way there. They were mind blown, of course. And then on the way back, it was, we're not stopping until we get to Wally's. Like that became where we want to stop.
The destination. Yeah. That's ideal. That's really ideal. Yeah. It's, if there was Wally's across America, it would be, make me very happy because it's like, you know what you're going to get. And it is a very open, clean environment. I mean, even just because I live in Sullivan, I mean, there's not a lot of place to buy gifts. So even when I'm like struggling to get a birthday gift or something like that, I can just stop by Wally's and pick it up and be on my way. So
Yeah, it's an awesome place. I highly recommend everyone goes and visits at least once, but I'm sure if you go once, you'll be back.
yes.
Going back to 2016 now, that major acquisition, can you kind of set the table, give some background on exactly what was going on with the company around that time and how you were thinking through and then eventually executed on this acquisition?
Yes. Okay, so going back to my dad in the late 90s, my dad, even though he wasn't structured, he did set up some key things like in our company. So like we had a person that he really respected that wanted to retire, and he really didn't want to lose that person's advice. So he's like, let's create an advisory board. So that person was our advisory board starting out. And so to say that and to say that the other thing he started, my dad, this is what I wanted to say, is like a strategy retreat. So Mobil Oil Corporation at the time in the mid 90s was a Harvard business case study for the balanced scorecard methodology. And we at the time were really kind of needing some structure. Like, how do you know how well your business is doing? I mean, yes, we would sit in management meetings prior to the scorecard, and we would be in this conference room with no windows. We would have fans going, and we would be hovering over P&L statements, which today seems ludicrous because the P&L statement is something that happened in the past, but we weren't talking about what's supposed to be happening in the future to then hopefully have a better outcome on the financial statements that we were hovering over. So it was like everything was past tense and everything felt like the flavor of the day. So then we got the scorecard methodology. And because of that, we started doing an annual strategy retreat. Okay, fast forward, my dad's been passed for over 10 years. We now have the strategy retreat. It now includes, now we have our advisory board and we have all of our management team. And we knew we wanted to grow through acquisitions. We had done the last big one in the convenience store wholesale side with BP's assets in 2006. We had done about 3 smaller ones in our lube business, 2008 to 2010. So, and we knew that kind of had been the trajectory of our success. It was a combination of this organic growth plus these acquisitions. So it was a challenge. We always put out who should we acquire, what would make the most strategic sense. And the Taylor family, which is Paul and Betty Taylor, were the original owners, and then their son Craig Taylor, who was the CEO at the time, like our facilities, our real estate person would be like, this would be a perfect fit because they don't overlap in our market areas. They're operating great stores. The size of their stores matches with the size of our stores. I mean, there were so many synergies. And there were a lot of naysayers. They are never going to sell. Well, we don't have a relationship with them, very close, blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, for this Missouri State Petroleum Board that I am on, the Convenience Store Association, I had been selected to get on the operating committee. So for a long time, I served on the board. Now I've been asked to serve on the operating committee. And the operating committee is just about a 6-year transition time to become president of the state association. So now I'm in this funnel, and Craig Taylor is the president before me. So it was back in, I'm going to say 2015, my oldest son and I went to an industry event and together just to talk about different generations in the industry, succession, what are your ideas, how do the different generations perceive things. And then when we came back from that conference, it just dawned on me, I'm going to call Craig Taylor and I'm going to tell him about this little experience I had in our industry and talk about succession and see, if there's any synergies that we can work together. So met him for breakfast, talked about that same conversation, and we ended there because they had a huge commissary in Fenton that they had built, and we were redoing our store in Cuba where our small little commissary because we had turned an old Burger King into our commissary. So the commissary is providing like sandwiches and fruit and vegetables to all the stores. We were out of space. And not only were we out of space, we literally needed to demo that down to make room for the new store we wanted to build. So that set the table. We became the commissary customer for Craig. And it helped them with their capacity issue, and it certainly helped us. And that started the partnership. So now there's dialogue. Now there's reasons to be talking. And I said, maybe there's other synergies that we could do. Like, can we continue this conversation? So now it's fast forward to our state association meeting in February of 2016. And I said, Craig, could we maybe like grab a drink and just catch up from our last conversation? And I said, have you had a chance to talk to your family? Like, do you feel like there's any other synergies that we could partner on? And he's like, Rachel, it's totally confidential, but I did talk to the family and we're going to sell. I'm like, I'm shocked. I'm like, sell? Okay. I said, are we going to be able to have a seat at the table? And he gave me 3 reasons why we weren't. One of the reasons was he didn't think that we had the wherewithal to do it. But I heard all of his reasons. And I said, Craig, I'm just going to let you know that this is what we've done. Like we just had placed a major bid on some properties in Canada. And so I kind of dispelled all of the things that he was worried about. But I said, Craig, the most important thing that we will do that no other person that is going to be buying your business will do is take care of your people. And I know how important that is to you and your dad, that your team is taken care of. And I told them some strategies that we had done with past acquisitions. Like if you had been working for the Taylor family for 20 years, when you come to Wallis Companies day one, you will have worked for us for 20 years. So those are just little examples of how I wanted their team, because it again would double the size of the number of employees that we have in our convenience store division. And I wanted them to feel like they were part of the team and not stepchildren from an acquisition standpoint. And it has now, because now we closed on it in 2016, it has been the most synergistic and the most financially rewarding acquisition we have done in our history.
Well, that's awesome. That's great to hear. At what point did you decide to step away from the family business and just remain as, I believe, a board member and then continue on this new path that you're on now?
So I became CEO in January of 17, and we had closed on the acquisition. July, people started finding out, and then Paul Taylor and we put together like 14 town hall in-person meetings. He would start the meeting, and I would talk about Wallis Companies, and he would talk about why they're selling. And then we closed, and then I did a 90-day best of both team to start getting the synergies in place and to start how we were going to move forward together. So what was the best of the both that we were going to take and start implementing in January of 17? January 17, I also became the CEO. And then for a myriad of reasons that are too much to go into, I basically had this president's council meeting that you asked me about before. I had been in a board meeting and then a family meeting. And then that night I stayed in St. Louis because I had this president's council meeting starting at 7 a.m. the next day. And I went to bed that night, and based on all of the things that were happening in my life personally and with the business, I woke up in the middle of the night, which never happens because I'm such a good sleeper. And I thought, I need to resign. And that thought led to the conversation at president's councils, which led to lots of other conversations, which led to a letter I wrote to my family explaining, where I was at that moment and what I needed to have the support to move forward as CEO. And in the end, I truly believe like all things in your life do happen for a reason, and there is a purpose behind them. And I do trust my gut. When it's time to go, it's time to go. And so, yes, I knew I would continue to be on the board, continue to be a shareholder, but gave my resignation notice, and we promoted our CFO to CEO. And then I serendipitously was volunteering as the chair of the HR committee for our synagogue for over 10 years. And they had no idea what was happening on this side of my life, but they asked me to come to a meeting on Sunday night to take care and try to give some advice for all the morale and personnel issues they were having at the synagogue. And on that night, one of the 12 board members spoke up and said, I am tired of coming to the synagogue on a Sunday night to talk about personnel issues. When are we hiring an executive director? And not at that moment, but through a process, I ultimately became the executive director. And that was the transition. Yeah. And today, we're made a conscious decision between first and second generation to move it to the third generation. And that's what we're working on now. But as anybody that works for a family business knows, there's ebbs and flows. And yes, I talk to a lot of family members and family businesses, and, it's complex, it's complicated. But there are definitely tactics to be used if you want to be able to collaborate together and keep family harmony and move it through the generations. There are tactics to be done that need to be in place for that to happen effectively, because the alternative is, like the TV show Succession or ending up on the front page of the paper, like we've seen other St. Louis family businesses,
Sure.
being in those circumstances. So, it's just you choose what side of the sidewalk you want to be on, the crazy side, or try to, put a lot of energy in and try to end up on the right side.
I'm sure we can talk in great detail about that, but I want to learn about what exactly the sixth level is in simple terms, and then also how the book and consulting strategy around the sixth level came about.
Thank you for asking. The book came out in November of 23. I guess I just, it is a book that tells you how to build a good, thriving culture in your organization. And back when I was telling you about the turnover that was happening when Tracy and I went out to those stores, our turnover was over 200% year on year. I mean, it was just a revolving door. We had no systems in place.
What is that like versus the industry average?
Yeah, at the time, the industry average was probably like 130%.
Okay.
So then we started with the scorecard. Now I have, this HR and training under my purview. And on our scorecard, we measured turnover. And so by 2005, we had gotten, as the organization, the turnover from 200% down to 60%. But our goal was 30% turnover. And that was, now we're measuring best in class on industry averages through our scorecard process. So we wanted to get to 30%. I read the book Good to Great by Jim Collins. I loved the concept of that book because I felt Wallis Companies was a good company, and I wanted Wallis Companies to be a great company. And, Jim Collins, and I know I'm dating myself, but he talked about some key concepts like a hedgehog or the right people on the bus. But what I was really intrigued and perplexed by was this flywheel. Like, how do you start the flywheel in your company? I mean, you're running a company, Raj. I mean, and you have grown. But I feel like when you are in it with, your team members, and when you have a problem to solve and you put it on the table and everybody starts like, well, what if we did this? Well, yeah. What if we did that and we thought about this, or we figured out how to solve this problem? And there's like this cohesion, and everybody's coming together with ideas to solve the problem that will move the business forward. Like, I wanted that flywheel for Wallis. Like, we were really good. I mean, we had a lot of good things in place. We were growing. We were doing these acquisitions. But there was just something missing, something to get us from the 60% to the 30%. And the thing with Good to Great is Jim Collins didn't tell me how to create that culture. So when the sixth level came out, I describe the book by 3 adjectives. It's simple. It's simple because there's 4 principles that must be in place for the flywheel to start and for this culture to be in place. It's simple, it's powerful, and it's deeply human. And so what I've observed in just talking to people that are, or even looking at Gallup studies, where I just read that 78% of employees feel disengaged at their organizations. I mean, it's an incredibly high number. 78% feel disengaged at the organizations they're working at. And why is this? And I believe in my heart that, a lot of our leadership thought processes were created in the industrial age. People are going to work. Now we have factories, we have assembly lines, standard operating procedures. So we lived and put a lot of practices in place. Yes, we evolved over this information age, but we have, because there was more transparency. People moved to open book and they had a lot more information at their hands. And now we have moved into a new era. And I was just talking to this other woman who started a AI company, AI 23. And so I'm giving her full credit for the era that she has labeled what we are in now. And she calls it the human potential era. And I'm like, yes, thank you. We are in the human potential era. And that is what the sixth level gives you a roadmap for, is how to operate in this new era. Because the AI component is going to be a team member on our team, but the humans that are in the team have to learn how to deal with each other relationally. And not everybody has the skill set. Not everybody has been trained on how do you have this relational operating system.
So if the person that reads the book will go away with an understanding of how to implement that relational operating system within their organization. Is the ideal reader like a CEO, an HR manager, or just really anyone on a management or leadership team?
Yeah, anybody that wants to expand their mind on how to be a more effective leader today should read the book. It is in 3 parts. The first part is like the research and the scientific of why are we here and what paradigms do we live under today and how does that mindset need to shift. That's the first part. And then the guts of the sixth level are these 4 core differentiators: mutuality, justness, ingenuity, and intrinsic motivation. That's the colored pages in the book. And there are stories, actual examples of putting these principles in place in these organizations. And then the last is the vision. I mean, what if every leader operated at the sixth level? What if every organization operated at the sixth level? What if every family operated at the sixth level? I mean, what a more humane and just and uplifting life experience we could have.
And are you now offering like coaching, consulting services to help implement this in organizations or to help coach people through? Because one challenge that I've had is I'll read a book, but then a month later I'll have not implemented what I read because I'm consuming so much information constantly. So is that a part of what you're offering? Okay.
Yes. And nothing's cookie cutter. I mean, the thing with the sixth level is like to really understand, we would have to come in and say, okay, what are you experiencing? What's your team experiencing? Talking to, having listening sessions with different team members. What are they experiencing? And then figuring out, like we would just assess through various mechanisms, are you struggling with mutuality? Are you struggling with this sense of belonging and this connection and this, this two-way empathy and being like on the same team and that somebody has your back? Is it mutuality that you're struggling with? Are you struggling with justness, where not everybody feels their voice is heard, where there's not accountability, where there's, standards for this person, but not for this person, where it's not very clear, transparent how we work together or how I grow with this company? So when justness is in place, it feels like trust. I mean, but justness is more than just trust. So there's lots of key components. We say there's lots of tactics that have to be in place for the principle to be apparent. And then there's intrinsic motivation. Like you as an entrepreneur and founder of your company, like you had some kind of intrinsic motivation to do something better for the communities that you serve, as well as, as your team has grown, like the path forward for them to develop them. And that was something my dad was passionate about. He's like, no matter how long you work at Wallis Companies, whether it's 1 day or 10 years, or you have your whole career with us, we want you to leave better personally and professionally. So intrinsic motivation is when the leader gets it, when the leader can see the forest through the trees, when the leader knows that it can be better than what it is. And maybe they don't have the exact fingerprint on it at that moment, but they just know it's possible because of the talent of the team, because of the market, because of circumstances, but they're intrinsically motivated to give it all. And when all of that is in place, then the fourth one, ingenuity, starts happening. So people, when they feel aligned and they understand and they feel trusted, then all of these ideas start coming forward. And so we have multiple stories in the book, and and I can just tell you the one story of somebody in the book that runs the hospital in Sullivan, because she put these core differentiators in place. And then when the ingenuity started happening, they have hit historic outcomes. So the highest patient satisfaction scores, the highest engagement, not only participation in the survey, but the highest engagement scores, and the recruitment. So, you just brought in a speaker for us about our demographics, and I say we are truly at a crisis point. And the crisis point is the AI, this feeling of isolation and disengagement and disconnection. And then also what Ness talked about, which is that we have more people dying than being born. And so when those three things converse, it's a crisis, and only those equipped with the right information to how to navigate the system going forward are going to be the ones successful, because we will all be fighting for the human talent that's left.
It's funny you bring that up. I couldn't stop thinking about that, the challenges and the issues we're facing in the labor pool in general. One other thing that comes to mind for me when you're talking about all of these things that the sixth level helps people with, I've heard from many other people that post-COVID, if you will, the workforce feels less engaged, less motivated. Do you think it's definitely technology and other things, but do you think that also has to do with changes in the way maybe younger people think about work? And do you think that going through a process like the sixth level can help leaders or managers connect with different generations and get them engaged in the overall mission of an organization?
Yes, definitely. I have 3 adult children. um, 30, 27, and 25. And my 2 sons both work for Deloitte. So like everything I do with the sixth level, and my daughter works at Children's Hospital in the NICU. So, and she is very good at listening to all my podcasts and giving me critical feedback and saying, I think you can do this next time, or you need a better close. But my sons, through their experience at Deloitte and being in that generation of hybrid working, yes, the sixth level, again, it's the relational model. So when people feel connected, whether they're connected at home or whether they're, at work, and you can feel just as disconnected sitting across the table with somebody as you can in a hybrid situation if you don't have these relational components. And I think the sixth level teaches people that it is built on these relational systems. And so, and there's guardrails in there. So it's not prescriptive. I mean, it is going back to the basics of teaching people how to have a connection and a relationship. And then everything under these principles flows from that element. So it takes time, and it's not easy. But as I talked about before, you can put all your energy into managing a team that you feel like no one's doing their job, nobody's showing up on time. Why did that person quit with no notice? You can spend a lot of energy there, or you can put your energy into a roadmap that is going to get you to better outcomes. It's still going to take the same amount of time investment. Maybe over time, this one will be more rewarding, and that your team will be thinking about ingenious ways to solve problems that help everybody, and you'll be doing on to the next opportunity. And that's what happens when you put the sixth level in place, is like it's generative and more ideas start flowing. So the things that Lisa's focused on today at the hospital 5 years later than she was at the start is very different. But everything that she's focused on is for the future and to continue to grow the business and ensure that the culture is thriving.
Got it. That makes a ton of sense. And I think it's very needed. And you mentioned kind of going back to basics. I think going back to the basics is necessary in a digital age where we really are, in a way, losing some of that connection, and people naturally crave that connection. Getting it at work is, I think, extremely important. Most of us spend, 40 plus hours a week in our work environments. So I think it's a great idea. And I love the thought process behind it. We've been chatting for, I think, a little over an hour. So I want to be respectful of your time. Before we close out the conversation, I have one last question for you. What's one unwritten teaching you've learned along the way that you think everyone listening or watching would get value from and may not have been taught? You've shared a lot, so it won't be easy to come up with this, but
I mean, I guess what comes to mind is to be an intentional leader. A lot of conversations that I have today talk, even though there's a lot of hybrid working, still people struggle with work life, what they call work life balance. I mean, I even heard you on the podcast talking about, just because you can bring your work home on your phone. I mean, it's there. And so it's hard not to check email. It's hard, to always be present. But I think if everyone, well, I guess what I've learned is that there is no balance. It's a tapestry of integration. And when you're integrating your family life and your friends and your work and your community, to be intentional about being present in whatever moment you have with that person. Because if you're on vacation with your kids building a sandcastle, but your mind is on your email and what deadline you have to make, then you're not doing justice to either. And for a long time, working full time and raising 3 kids, I personally struggle with this. Like, I felt guilty if I was at home changing diapers, and then I felt because I wasn't getting my project done, and then I felt guilty at work that I wasn't spending time with my kids. So what I've learned is that, being present in the moment is the biggest gift that you can give yourself. And I also think it helps with the clarity in your mind. When you can be fully present with your kids and listening to them and asking them questions and maybe having a conversation about work with your kids that applies to them, that's going to be so rewarding that you will then have more capacity when you go back to your job and think about just being intentional at that moment with the problem that you're faced with. So I think I would call it maybe intentional growth, because just because of all we talked about getting the right people, in your life at the right time to overcome mental illness hurdles, mental stress hurdles, any barrier that you see. And so being intentional with your presence and with your solutions.
well, thank you for sharing that. I can totally relate, and it's a constant work in progress for myself, and I'm sure many others. Where can anyone listening or watching learn more about you or the sixth level?
Yes. Okay. Well, we have a website for the sixth level. So it is the six spelled out SIXTH level.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn. And anytime you would like to, have a conversation about the sixth level or just have a cup of coffee on anything that we've talked about, it's one of the things I love to do is just network and collaborate and meet other people. So I would love to meet you.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel. Appreciate your time.